So we put together this Be Brave campaign with help from the Zero Project to help protect people and help educate people about their Miranda rights. On the right-hand side, Be Brave. BRAVE stands for be calm, request an attorney, avoid talking, verify that the attorney's been called, and then know everything will be okay. You've heard it on cop shows. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney before and during any questioning. So we want you to understand and exercise your rights because people continue to be charged for alleged non-disclosure even if they're on effective treatment. What we don't want you to do is accidentally admit to doing something wrong, like, I know I should have disclosed, when in fact, if you're undetectable, you didn't have to disclose, and maybe you didn't understand that. But if you start talking without a lawyer present, then you might say something to undermine your case. We know that people aren't being educated accurately on the law, and they're also not being educated on how to protect themselves from false accusation. And that's part of this resource that we put together, a Get Help page on our website that gives you further guidance on what to do to protect yourself, and a bunch of resources you can share with your lawyer that helps them understand the science behind U equals U, low-risk sexual acts, or ways to show them you did disclose and mount a good defense. So go to our website if you're facing charges, or just go check it out to educate yourself further. So how do we actually disclose and have that conversation with our sex partner? Well, there are some resources here on the right-hand side from the CDC and Pause Magazine that give you some tips and tricks on how to have that conversation. Ultimately, it's a personal call when it's safe to do so. Some people do it right away when they first meet someone to get it out of the way. Other people want to wait a little bit before they have that conversation. Obviously before they have sex, but to gauge whether or not they can trust the other person. Some people are undetectable and don't want to share as there is no risk, and they are not legally required to do so. So it really comes down to your gut, a personal call, when you know the information isn't going to be used against you in some way. If you're not comfortable or it doesn't feel safe to have the conversation yourself, there are some alternatives. The Department of Health offers partner notification services. They will actually contact your partners on your behalf. Contact your care coordinator to access this service. You can also go to this website, tellyourpartner.com. It works for HIV and other STIs. You have to know the person's cell phone number, but you put in the other person's information and it sends them an anonymous confidential text that says something like, somebody in your network has tested positive. You might want to go ahead and get tested. It does now cost $2.99 per text. Of course, if you do have that conversation, make sure that you document it in writing or in a text or in front of somebody else. And we'll give you some tips and tricks on how to do that. So ultimately, disclosure. If it ain't written down, it didn't happen. Unfortunately, if you don't have proof, then it's going to be your word against the other person's word, and they're typically going to believe the person who doesn't have HIV. We obviously want our relationships to work out. In the first couple weeks and months, we're optimistic that things are going to go well. We don't want to plan for the alternative. What we see in our research is sometimes what happens is the relationship does go south, and now you have a person that maybe has a grudge against you. They might even threaten you. If you leave me, I'm going to tell people that you didn't disclose. So we don't want things to go south, obviously, but we do want to protect ourselves in case they do. And that's why we have these tips and tricks. First off, if you have that conversation in an email or text, save those messages. Same thing with social media or dating app interactions. The important thing is make sure it shows the date that the message was sent. Sometimes, particularly like dating apps, you can't actually see the date where the message was sent. What I tell people in that case is take a screenshot, a picture of that interaction on your phone, and then you'll have a date and time stamp embedded in the file that you can use to show, hey, this picture was taken on such and such a date. That's when the conversation happened. You now have proof. The other thing some people do is take a video of their disclosure to their partner. Obviously, get their permission first. And I know this sounds a little awkward to do, but what I tell people is these tips and tricks are here to protect you. It's a lot more awkward to have to defend yourself in a court of law and you don't have any proof. The next one is probably my favorite and the most practical. So go ahead and have the conversation whenever it comes up naturally. It might be before you have sex for the first time. It might be on an initial date or two. Go ahead and have the conversation. And then the next day, send your partner an email and CC yourself and just kind of recap the conversation. Make it conversational, like, hey, I'm glad we had a chance to talk about my HIV status before we had sex last night. Here's some more information about HIV in case you have more questions. I look forward to seeing you again. All of a sudden, without them realizing it, you've created a documentation trail that shows you had the conversation. But you don't have to do it in a super direct way that maybe freaks them out. You can also discuss your status in the presence of a third party, like a roommate or a friend or a family member, who can later attest that you actually did have the disclosure conversation. The first one here I heard from a care coordinator. If you're in a dating relationship, it might be a really good gesture to say, hey, you may have some questions about HIV. Why don't you come in and talk to my doctor or my care coordinator, and they can answer those questions for you. It's a great show of faith early on in a relationship, but more importantly, you now have evidence, a third party, because they're going to make notes in your case file that the conversation happened and that they knew your status. Another option, there's a document here. You can scan the QR code. It's from the Zero Project. If you're a little more legalistic, maybe depending on the nature of the relationship, you could actually have them sign a piece of paper that says, yes, I understand this person is living with HIV, yada, yada, yada. And now you have a documented evidence, a statement attesting to the fact that they know your status. Very formal, but it might work in some situations. The next one isn't as good as, actually documenting the conversation. But if you keep a diary, make a note in your diary that you had the conversation. And then if it does get brought up in a court of law, you can bring out your diary and say, see, here on October 13th, I made a note that I had the conversation. It can help make your case. And the last part here, in the spirit of helping to make your case, if there's other physical evidence about your HIV status that your lawyer can use to show, see, my client had every intent of sharing their status. They have nothing to hide. They've got medication out in clear sight, or they've got Pause magazines in their living room, or it's posted on their dating app profile. Of course, take a screenshot of that so you have a date when that was visible. All of those tips can help your lawyer make a case to show that you had all intentions of disclosing your status, and here's some supporting physical evidence.